All right, if y'all would turn to 1 Kings chapter 17. I'll remind you while you're turning over there kind of where we've been. I'm still building off of, I'm still on this theme I've been on for a couple of months of the ordinary becoming extraordinary. I also used a term on this that it's all right to be little bitty. I'm trying to focus on how God uses the little things of this world, the little people of this world to do great and extraordinary things. Reminds you of the last 3 weeks as we looked at that of the extraordinary work. This here we're calling it extraordinary compassion. That still comes into play. That's still in the background. If I had more time, I would read it, but I don't. But remember the first 3 weeks we spent on this, we were over in Luke chapter 7, verses 11 through 17, where we looked at that widow in Nain, where Jesus comes along and he finds a poor widow and her son is dead, and he messes the funeral all up, and he shows up in verse 13, he shows up and he has compassion upon her. And I'm trying to go from there and break down the roles and how this compassion works and what it does. And there's literally about 6 or 8 other places that I find we could go from there. I find 8 points, and don't worry, I won't try to share all 8 of them this morning, but I find 8 points that as I see this extraordinary compassion, this compassion that goes beyond what we see in everyday life, beyond what we can physically comprehend. I have 8 points that I want to try to get to you with in the next coming weeks to show that. But one of the more detailed places that I find doing that is here in 1 Kings 17, going back pretty Old Testament, literally going back over 1,000 years before Jesus performed that miracle in Nain. And we see a somewhat similar miracle going on here. We'll begin in verse 8 here of 1 Kings 17. And it says, then the word of the Lord came to him, and that him would be Elijah. It says, came to him saying, arise and go to Zarephath, which belongs to Sidon, and dwell there. See, I have commanded a widow there to provide for you. So he arose and he went to Zarephath. And when he came to the gate of the city, indeed a widow was there gathering sticks. And he called to her and he said, please bring me a little water in a cup that I may drink. And as she was going to get it, he called to her and he says, please bring me a morsel of bread in your hand. So she said, as the Lord your God lives, I do not have bread, only a handful of flour in a bin and a little oil in a jar. And see, I am gathering a couple of sticks that I may go in and prepare it for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die. And Elijah said to her, do not fear. Go and do as you have said, but make me a small cake from it first and bring it to me, and afterward make some for yourself and your son. For thus says the Lord God of Israel, the bin of flour shall not be used up, now nor shall the jar of oil run dry, until the day of the Lord sends rain on the earth. So she went away and did according to the word of Elijah. And she and her household ate for many days. And the bin of flour was not used up, nor did the jar of oil run dry, according to the word of the Lord, which he spoke by Elijah. Now it happened after these things that the son of the woman who owned the house became sick. And his sickness was so serious that there was no breath left in him. So she said to Elijah, what have I to do with you, O man of God? Have you come to me to bring my sin to remembrance and to kill my son? And he said to her, give me your son. So he took him out of her arms and carried him to the upper room where he was staying and laid him on his own bed. Then he cried out to the Lord and said, O Lord my God, have you also brought tragedy on this widow with whom I lodged by killing her son? And he stretched himself out on the child 3 times and cried out to the Lord and said, O Lord my God, I pray this child's soul come back to him. Then the Lord heard the voice of Elijah, and the soul of the child came back to him, and he revived. And Elijah took the child and brought him down from the upper room into the house and gave him to his mother. And Elijah said, see, your son lives. Then the woman said to Elijah, now by this I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord in your mouth is the truth. Praise God. This is one of the more remarkable stories of God's compassion, and this is the one I want to base the next couple of weeks out of the things we're going to get into with this. But first, it's a question I've been on, I guess, since August. I've been contemplating this question. I've been trying to preach it, and literally the question I pose to it, is how do I understand, how do I describe, how do I wrap my mind around this compassion here? And I've titled them of what I understood as compassion, what I knew compassion to be, what I would, and don't forget the simple Webster's definition of compassion was to come alongside of, and you know that's I can give all kind of examples and have given them in the past of what ordinary compassion is, but that going to extraordinary compassion comes to an entire another level, comes to another place that I really have trouble wrapping my mind around, but I want to try to break down in the coming weeks to understand more what it is. And the first one I thought of as I read this story a couple of weeks ago, I thought, boy, now this is exactly what compassion seems to be more than anywhere else. And the story goes, there was this CEO. He was in New York City, and he had the penthouse job and of this multi-million-dollar Fortune 500 company, and he's riding home back in the mountains to his home, and he's in his limo, and he's riding down the road, and as he's going down the road, he looks offside the road, and here's two men on the side of the road, and literally both of these men are down on their hands and their knees like cows, and they're eating grass on the side of the road. He says, wait a minute, something's weird right here. And they're literally down here chewing the grass, kind of like old Nebuchadnezzar was doing over there in Daniel. And so he says, driver, hey, stop right here. And he stops. And he rolls up there and he rolls his window down and says, hey, said, what are you guys doing? And they looked at him and said, well, sir, said, we're both laid off, so we're both hungry. So we've got nothing else to eat, so we're out here eating the grass on the side of the road. And he said, well, come on, guys, y'all get in here with me, and I'll take you back to my house. I'll take you back to my mansion with me. And the one man stands up and he said, well, sir, I'd love to go, but said, if you look under the tree right over there, he said, I got a wife and two kids that I would have to bring with me. He said, well, bring them on. There's room for plenty. And the other guy stands up and he kind of sheepishly says, well, sir, said, I would love to go too, but just over the hill there, said, I got a wife and 7 kids. I said, I don't know that you can feed all. He said, man, I got plenty. He said, come on. So they get them over there and they all stuff them into the limousine, and these people just can barely fit in there, and they stuffed in there like clowns in a clown car, and they start going down the road, and the man that has the 7 kids, he looks at him and says, sir, you don't know how much I appreciate this. Said, we hadn't had a good meal in over a week, and said my kids is hungry, and we just can't thank you enough for this. And he looks at him and said, man, it's nothing. Said, I'm happy to do this. Said, this is a great place, you'll love it. Said, there's 12 acres there, and he said the grass is almost a foot tall. You see, that's ordinary compassion. There's always a string attached. There's always something a little deeper going on with it. You know, how many of you have had the promise from the car salesman that your life will be better if you'll just buy this car? How many have believed the promises that we hear over and over again in our society of all these promises give us all that we want, but there's always that string attached. How many preachers can you hear this morning? I'll bring you the greatest blessing you've ever get as long as you give me a little bit of seed money over here, they like to call it, where his bank account can grow. You know, that's the seed they're planting. But there's always a string attached with these things. You know, you look at all the political stuff we see going on now. Whatever it is Trump's fault. I don't even know what it is right now. But whatever is going on in our politics, you look, you've got 2 great big debates within our society. You've got the one over here that wants nothing but great big government. We've got the one side of the argument. They want the government to be bigger. They want bigger checks. They want free health care. They want all these other free college and all these other things, and the government is going to take care of us. Just give me more taxes and a bigger government. Then you've got the other side over here. We just need bigger corporations. We need bigger companies. Get the government out of it. Let the jobs grow. Let the economy grow. Let everything go bigger. And at the end of the day, we missed the point that Deuteronomy teaches us back over there. Either way, it's not a question of which one does better. It's a question of which one of us becomes enslaved to them more. We're the slave to a big corporation. We're the slave to a government. But the little man, just kind of like this poor widow right here, we become a slave in either case. We become a wage slave or we become a government slave. But in either case, nobody but the guy on top wins. Nobody ever wants to talk about that. In either case, no one reaches down. There's always that string attached. My wife just a couple of weeks ago was dealing with AT&T. Was it 2.5 hours you spent on the phone? Something like, how long? Hour and a half? And I literally said, then every American corporation, we had a long conversation about the companies we worked for yesterday, me and Chase. And literally, as I see the bigger corporations grow, they become nameless, they become faceless, they become heartless, and they become brainless. They become an entity that grows that has one thing but a hand to reach and put more in their wallet. Literally, that is the ordinary compassion that I see in our world every day. And then I begin to think, on about 2 weeks I stayed on this because I was out last Sunday. And the next one that come to my mind was one of the sweeter ones I've seen, and it was with Ben. Was that last year or the year before last? I lose track of time here. We had taken a group of kids from right here, and Beth had done a drive here, and we had raised some funds, and we had raised some articles for the Lawrence County Animal Rescue League. And we had a couple kids here one Saturday, and we go down here to Monticello, and we deliver the goods, and we go through and look at all the little puppies and all the little cats and everything else like that. And Ben here, he's never been a cat. Mama's the same way. He's never been an animal person. Mama and Ben, they don't hate animals, but they just don't want them around them. They've never been animal people. And we get back home, and Ben says, well, he said, I don't know how to explain this. He said, there was this one little cat over here, and he's a little skinny, kind of ugly, little thin, black cat, and he's a little bobtailed cat. And says, I don't know. So Ben said, when I saw him, he literally said he made my heart melt. So what did we do? Monday, we back over there. We adopted this cat, and we bring him home. And what do? We bring him in. The first thing, we got to get rid of the fleas that he's got. Then we got to start building up because he's a poor, skinny little thing. And we bring him in, and he still kind of has a little trouble of feeling safe sometimes. We bring in and we bring him safety, and we bring him shelter, and we heal up his wounds, and we get rid of. And if you've seen him now, he's about this long, and he's just about this wide too. He's as sport, and he's as happy, and he's as fast. Some of y'all have seen him. I'm not lying to you. He's about as sport as a cat can get. I think, boy, that's a good picture of compassion. I don't know how I can get compassion much better than that. But then I thought on that a couple of weeks, and I prayed on that several times, and God kept telling me, no, that's not compassion. That's just ordinary compassion. We can go out and find all kind of secular events and NFL and everything else that has nothing to do with God that do some of those same things today. And I began to think about it, and some of my original things that I taught about at the first of this month were in Luke 7. I began to think, well, I can't think of any better example of compassion in our society today than to look at first I began this thought with back at 9/11 and showing all the history and the things I look back, the things I had lived through and forgotten with all the rescue workers and things going on with that, and then with the hurricane here lately and all. Well, boy, those are great compassion, but God kept saying, no, that's not quite it. And I said, well, I know what it is. And I even thought of it. What is that? John chapter 15, verse 13. This verse came in my mind, and Jesus said there, he said, greater love has no more man than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends. I said, well, he's talking about soldiers right there. I mean, man, I work with guys. There some here, I see the pictures from Afghanistan, Iraq. Certainly some here have been affected by Vietnam. And I mean, these guys, they're remarkable. Their sacrifice, their service, their all the things they go through is just tremendous. And to see these guys over there and simply lay down their life for others, simply go through all the things they go through, what's more remarkable? What's more extraordinary than that? What can be beyond comprehension of that? And I began to think about that, and still the answer wouldn't come. Like, no, that's not quite it. That's not quite it. And last Sunday morning, while I'm sitting there running the crane, and some of y'all are right here, the answer finally come to me, and God put it to me like this. He said, if that's compassion, answer me this. How many soldiers have you ever seen die for the enemy? and it struck me like somebody hit me right between the eyes. You see, what I comprehended all these years, all these thoughts I ever had of compassion, God blew them all up in that one statement. Because I've seen compassion from a mother to her child. I've seen compassion from a pastor to his church member. I've seen compassion from homeless people. I've seen compassion on these others. But that is just our love. That is just common. That is ordinary between us and the others. What we see in the pages of the Bible between the extraordinary compassion of a God who would reach down not just to his children, not just down to the ones he loved, but to the ones John told us was to the whole world. For God loved the whole world that he gave his only begotten Son. Over and over again, James talks about in James 4:4, he says, literally, we are enemies with Christ. So I think it's about a dozen times the New Testament used, at least in the King James, it uses the word enmity. Romans 8 talks about we're at enmity with Christ. What does that mean? We are literally enemies with Christ. We think we're so good. We think our suits, we think our church attendance, we think our good works do something, and over and over and over again, and we've missed the point that we are the enemies. What is so extraordinary about Christ? He did not lay down his life for his brothers. He laid down his life for his enemies. He laid down those who hate him, those who don't want him, those who have refused him. Over and over again, a common thing if you read the book of Jeremiah, God looks at his people and he says, I have loved you, but you do not want me. The Christian Standard Bible uses that very word. He says, I have loved you, but you do not hate, but you do not love me. You do not want me. Literally, the extraordinary compassion that we see played out in the Bible in these verses. And I've only got a couple minutes to share my 2 points I want to get to you with today on this. Are those points? He gave his life for those who didn't care about him. Notice this. Now, I'll show you more about Elijah last week. Just don't miss this note right here in Elijah in the verses I just read to you. To put it closely as I can put it, to put it to you guys today, he was the closest thing they'd seen to Christ. Don't miss this point, that as you read through the Gospels and you see the comparisons over and over again, you see many people call and said, I think he's Elijah. Remember over there whenever Jesus come to his disciples and he said at the end of John 6 and he says, who do you think I am? And he said, some say you're Elijah, some say you're Moses, some say you're another prophet. And finally Peter told him, hey, you are the Son of God. You see, he was as close as they could understand to the Messiah coming was Elijah. And the thing about Elijah, we don't know nothing about him. Back up to the verse right here in 17, that's all we know about him. He popped up out of nowhere. Where he come from, how he was trained, well, all the other past, we don't know. We just know where he shows up here in chapter 17. But the thing I want you to get, the thing most noteworthy, the little bitty person here is this widow. And if you miss the comparisons between this widow and Luke 7, you won't ever get this. There's many, many comparisons between this poor widow, between this starving widow. Really, what does she say there in verse 13? I'm going to go make some bread for me and my what is that, verse 12, brother? She says, I'll make some bread for me and my son that we may eat it and die. That's in pretty bad shape. I've missed a meal or two here and I thought I was going to die, but it's obvious I wasn't even close. She understands what she's talking about here, that I'm fixing to eat a piece of light bread here and that's going to be the end of it. We're going to pass away. She's not exaggerating. She's not. Beth tells us Martins get real mad when we get hungry. Hangry, she calls it. We get pretty hangry. Me and my boys and my girls all like that. She's not like that right here. She's literally talking about death. She's not talking in any symbolism or any exaggeration right here. And notice God has sent Elijah to her right here. And in a couple of minutes I got, let me show you 3 verses here real quick that come into play to what I want you to get here. Read verse 14 with me. It says, for thus says the Lord God of Israel, the bin of flour shall not run dry, and the day of the Lord shall not send rain on the earth. So she went and did according to the word of Elijah, and she and her household ate for many days. And now, one thing that's so remarkable around here, and that's one that I've got to bring up more. I don't have much time to get on that day. But what do we find out of her right there but obedience? Ask yourself this for just hearing this morning. If God come to you today and he asked you, I need everything you got and I need you to come serve me, how many of us would be willing to do it? You know, how many of us today who stand here in church and who say, I'm God's child, I'm a born-again Christian, would not find ourselves like that man Jesus ran to in Luke 18 when he says, if you want me, sell everything and come follow me. So see, this woman here did that. She was not that rich young ruler. She was like those disciples that left their nets, that left their boats, that left their family, that left everything they had. What's so remarkable about that? Back up right here to verse 12. So she said, as the Lord your God lives. Now notice right there, she talks to Elijah and she says, the Lord your God. Underline that. I got it circled in my Bible right here, the your God. Because don't notice who this widow is. If you noticed at verse 9 right there when you start reading, she's from Zarephath. Now, where is that at? Actually, today it has a name that starts with an S, and it's similar to Zarephath that I can't say. But it would be in the northwestern section of Lebanon today, right on the Mediterranean Sea. Now, if you read the first part of this chapter, Elijah started out over here in Samaria, and he went to Ahab, and he told Ahab, hey, there's a drought coming. Ahab said, I'm going to kill you, and God told him, run over here to the brook Cherith. Because some will use K Kerith, depending on your translation. So he had to cross the Jordan. He had to go some 100 and some odd miles straight to the east and hide over here in the hills in the middle of nowhere. Well, then the birds run out and the bread run out and the stream run dry. So God said, go to Zarephath. Now that was a long distance. I hadn't found how long it was, but he had to come back to the Jordan. He had to go north up to Jordan. He had to go around the Sea of Galilee. He had to go across the land that's called Phoenicia at the time. Most of it would be Lebanon today. And he winds up over here on the northeastern coast on this little town that was literally, today, and put it in today's language, it'd be a steel mill town. The name Zarephath means smelting or to forge. It was a place where they took whatever kind of metals they used to the day and they forged them in and they made metals that the rest of the world used in this little town. And he comes up to this little place and he encounters this widow. Notice the one thing about this widow, beyond she's poor, beyond we see her son die here in just a minute, she's a Gentile. Don't miss the importance of that. That the Gentile meant she was outside. She was beyond little bitty. She was clean. She was unclean. She was dirty. She was hateful. And the thing within that verse right there, when she says in verse 12, the Lord your God lives, she knew about this God. But see, within her land, they had all the Greek gods present. They had 2 or 3 gods. They had one God of the smelting God. They said this guy brings metal to us. They had 4 or 5 of their own gods. They had all these other gods. And when you walk down their streets, you saw this temple set up over here, and you saw this temple over here, and you saw another temple over here. And right in the middle of them, at the end of them, she knows about God. What did she say here? The Lord's your God to Elijah. You see, she's heard the stories about Moses. She's heard the stories about Pharaoh. She knows about what all went on. She knows about Joshua who came in their back door and took stuff down. She knows about David and all the conquerors and the mighty works that God does around. But Miss Jamie told me this one time in Sunday school, I've never forgot. When you see this particular lady right here in this widow, she had one thing. I just want God in there to cover all my bases. I got Zeus over here, and I got Asclepius over here, and we may even have one to Ra over here, and we got 4 or 5 right more. And we're going to take Yahweh. We're going to take this God that Elijah represents, that Elijah serves, and we're going to set him over here too, just to make sure we cover all of them. And we're going to mix him right in the middle of all of these gods, and we're going to have him just like we want him. That way we don't miss anything. See, that's when she says, Lord's your God. I know about him. But the one thing that I want you to take out of this today, guys, that I got time to get to is this. You see, she knew God in principle, but she did not know him in person. You see, when you look through your country today, and I'm fixing to give you one example after I show you the rest of the scripture. We live in a world that knows about God. We live in a world that even says they know God, but at the end of the day, God does not know them. At the end of the day, God has never went from a God in principle, from a God in written on a page, from a God we colored in a Sunday school lesson, to a God that interjects in our lives. A God that has great compassion on the state we're in. Now go from verse 12 right there down to verse 18. What have I to do with you, O man of God? Notice what God did there. I can't imagine he puts her in the worst case, the same case we find that widow in Luke 7 right there, where her sons died. Well, what is it now? What did you bring this God around for me for? Hermes didn't do this to me. Zeus didn't do this to me. Hercules didn't bring this on me. Thor didn't make this happen. Ra didn't cause this. Molech didn't do this. Dagon didn't do this. This is this old nasty God you're trying to tell me out of Jehovah. He did this to me. And she finds herself in such a terrible place. But we'll talk much more about verse 21 next week. But let me show you verse 24, the real kicker to it right here. Then the woman said to Elijah, now by this I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord in your mouth is the truth. See, she went from a place where she knew God in principle to where she knew God in person. The one thing I asked you this morning to decide, is he a personal God, is have you begin to hate your personal sin. You know, over and over and again, God's relayed himself to us. Just like he did right here. See, she started the part, your God. What's your God doing? At the end, she said, I know the truth. See, the truth, Jesus said in John 14:6, he said, I'm the way, I'm the truth, and I'm the light. How many of us have come to that light? See, I have never encountered but one person in my life, and that's been almost 20 years now, that said, I have never heard of God. And I think he was lying, but he might not have been. But how many of us I know him in principle, but how many of us know him in person? In person enough that he changes me. In person enough that I say I know the truth and I want to follow that truth. I want to walk in that truth. I don't want to be at enmity with God. See, Romans 10:9 says, he who believes in his heart and confesses with his mouth will be saved. How many of us have confessed but never followed? How many of us have known all the principles and all the rules and all the good things, but inside we know we're still rotten and decaying? How many of us have been to that cross, but it's so long ago it doesn't even matter in our lives anymore? You see, the lesson that I get out of my family's trip the other day is we can know him in principle, but until his person begins to change us, we're all just lying there. So see, this lady was changed. This lady was not the same person in verse 24 that she was in verse 12. Believe me, we're going to look at that more in the coming weeks. But what I want to offer this church, what I want to offer any person this morning is that same change that she had, the same change that I found in my own life. And I asked you this morning, when has God ever become personal to you? Most of us, it came through a hard time in life, just like this lady right here. Sometimes it came in other things, but there's a point and there's a time and there's a place where God has revealed himself to you. My question is, what have you done with it? And as we come for our offering this morning, that's the one question that I have for you this morning. See, this lady had a response at the end. She said, now I know the truth. I know about these gods of the Egyptians. I know about these gods of the Phoenicians. But I know the one that's the truth. What do you know about the truth this morning? Come on, brother.